Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Tzadik Ches, one Daf Tzadik Zayin on the base, 2 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, a ton of Rabbanim we learned in the Brisa. Hazorek Mishus if one throws an object from one Rishus Harabim over to the other Rishus Harabim, Rishus HaYachid ve'emtza, in between there's Rishus HaYachid, a private domain which is dissecting. So if he throws it at a distance of Dalad Amis and 4 Amis is Chayiv. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi here is on the bottom line, beginning with the words Mishus Harabim, Rishus Harabim, Rishus HaYachid ve'emtza, Dalad Amis Chayiv. Says Rashi, when we say Dalad Amis is Chayiv, Im Ava Rishus Harabim Dalad Amis, we mean to say that the item, if the object passed through the airspace of Rishus Harabim, 4 Amis of that airspace, even if you're going to combine the 2 sections of Rishus Harabim with each other to arrive at this total of 4 Amis is Chayiv. So once again, he's standing in Rishus Harabim, he throws an object over Rishus HaYachid into the next Rishus Harabim. So if the object has been transferred within Rishus Harabim at a total of 4 Amis, even if you need to combine the 2 public domains to arrive at this total, he is Chayiv. Continues the Gemara up on Tzadik Chesed, and Aleph Pachas Ma'arba Amis Pater. But if the total area, a total of Rishus Harabim airspace that this object had passed through is less than 4 Amis, then he's Pater. My Kamashma, what is the Chiddush here? Of course, we know that transferring an object 4 Amis to Rishus Harabim is a malacha. Says the Gemara, actually, there are 2 Chiddushim here. Hakamash Malon, the Brisa is teaching us, Rishus Mitzdarfis, that 2 domains, 2 separate public domains, 2 separate Rishus Harabims can combine to arrive at this total of 4 Amis. That's number 1. Number 2, we don't apply the concept of kluta when something is contained in the airspace of a Rishus. It is treated as though it landed there. No, we don't say that. And therefore, although the object passed through the airspace of Rishus HaYachid, we don't regard it as though it landed there, as though there was a hanacha, and therefore, he's not chayiv due to the Rishus HaYachid. The only reason why it's chayiv is if the combined transfer in the Rishus Harabim airspace was 4 Amis or more, then he's chayiv because he was mavir Arba Amis Rishus Harabim. Continues the Gemara. Omar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Omar Be'abba Omar Rav Huna Omar Rav HaMavir Dalad Amis Rishus Harabim B'Kura. If one transfers an object 4 Amis in a Rishus Harabim which is covered, which is roofed, Potter, he's exempt. Because it's not akin, it doesn't resemble the Diglei Midbar, the encampment of the Yisrael in the Midbar. So the Malach of Eitzah is learnt from the situation in the Midbar, as we learned in Daf Tzadik Vav. We learned it from the fact that Yisrael were told to not to bring their contribution to the Mishkan on Shabbos. So we learn the concept of Haitzah from the Midbar, and therefore the Rishus Harabim needs to be similar. It needs to resemble the Rishus Harabim of the Midbar, just as there it was not roofed, it wasn't covered. Here as well, we cannot be held liable for being maver in Rishus Harabim if it is covered and roofed. Says the Gemara, is that so? V'hagolos. What about those wagons which carried the stacks of the krushim, of the boards of the Mishkan? The Mekuras Havyan, they were roofed, they were covered. They were covered with the krushim that were lying over them. Nevertheless, V'amar Rav, and Rav himself said, Mishur B'chia, Agolis. What is the status of these wagons? Tachtein beneath them, Ubeineim, in between the wagons, Vitzidein, on their sides, Rishus Harabim. They have a status of Rishus Harabim. Now, although these areas were fully covered by the krushim, which were very long and were lying on the alongside the width of these wagons. So these wagons were actually rectangles. They were 5 amas long, 2.5 amas wide, and the krushim were lying alongside over the width of these agolis, of these wagons. The krushim were very long; they were 10 amas long. So they would extend all across this area of the agolis. So the agolis were driven in a manner where there was one alongside the other. They had two pairs of wagons. They were two alongside each other, and the krushim would actually cover the whole area. So the agolis were covered by the krushim. Beinei, in between these two wagons, there were the krushim, which extended from wagon to wagon. And vitzidein, tzidein meaning the area of the wheels of the agolis, were also covered by krushim. So it was completely covered. Nevertheless, Rav says, in the name of Rav Chia, that this whole area had a din of Rishus Rabim. How is that compatible with what Rav just told us? That Rishus Rabim, which is covered, there's no liability there for being maver dal damis. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. Rashi has 6 lines from the top. Mikura means mechusa, covered, roofed. V'ha agolis, the mishkan, the mikuras havu, that were roofed, that were covered. B'kroshim, hasadurin aleim. They were roofed, they were covered through the krushim, the boards which were stacked on them. Rachvan lo'erecha agola. So the width of the krushim, the Gemara soon will explain exactly how they were lying. So the width of the krushim were positioned along the length of the wagon, but Urkan, and the length of the boards, L'Rachvan, was situated alongside over the width of the agola, Areish Afreiseh, on top of the walls, on the frame of the agola. Because Salka Daitach. Now the Gemara at this point figures, Alpnei Kol Oirech HaAgola Soim Sedoris, that the krushim were stacked alongside the entire length of the wagons, so the wagons were fully covered. If they're covered, then how can we regard them as a full-fledged Rishus Rabim? Says the Gemara, Ki Ka'amar Rav. When Rav says that the agolis had a din of Rishus Rabim, what he's referring to is bedarasa, meaning in between the stacks. You're right, underneath the stacks of boards, that's covered. That's not considered to be a bona fide Rishus Rabim. It's a covered Rishus Rabim. When Rav said that underneath the agolis is Rishus Rabim, he meant to say, in between those stacks, so there was airspace there. Those areas were not covered. Says let's take a look. Let's analyze the configuration of these loads of the krushim on agolis. The Gemara is going to have 4 steps until the conclusion. So the Gemara begins as follows. Let's take a look. Urcha de agola kama havai. How long was the agola? Chamish amin. It was 5 amas long. So it was a rectangle, 5 by 2.5. Now pusya de keresh kama havai. How wide was the keresh? Was this board? Amsa palga, 1.5 amas. So the keresh actually was 10 amas long. It was roichav. There was a width of 1.5 amma, and the thickness was an amma. So it was 10 long, 1.5 wide, by a thickness of 1 amma. Let's figure how they're going to stack the boards on the wagons. Now Rashi explains there were actually 48 krushim and 4 wagons to transport them, leaving us with 12 krushim per wagon. So they need to be stacked up in some sort of configuration. Let's figure out how. So once again, the width of the keresh is 1.5 amma. And then where it figures that he's going to place the krushim on their width over the agola. So how many stacks can he form? Kama moisif. How many stacks? Tlasa. At most they can put 3 stacks alongside each other. So they had 1 keresh, next to it another keresh, next to another keresh, and each one had a stack of krushim for a total of 12 krushim. Why? Because if each keresh is 1.5 wide and the entire wagon is only 5 long, so at most you can fit in is 3 stacks of 1.5. Now how much is going to be remaining? How much airspace? Pasha le palgadamsa. You have a half amma remaining because 3 times 1.5 is 4.5. You have another half of airspace remaining. Now you take that half of amma of airspace and distribute it equally between the stacks. You're going to be left with a very small amount of airspace. If you distribute that airspace, that half a amma remaining airspace between the stacks, dummy, you're going to have a small airspace which is less than 3 tvachim. And as we learned on Daf Tzadik Zayin that an area which is less than 3 tefachim is considered to be covered up and closed. So this small airspace is not reckoned with. So once again, how can we say that underneath the agolis there was the Rishus Rabbim? It was completely roofed. Even this airspace is considered to be covered and roofed. So we'll proceed now and analyze, suggest perhaps a different configuration of the krushim on the agolis, which will allow for a larger airspace. Says the Gemara, Misavers, do you maintain krushim apusaya b'manachlu, that he placed the krushim on their width, which is 1.5 amas wide? Achuda manachlu, rather than placing them on their width, they were placed on their narrow side, which is merely an amma wide. Okay, let's figure out this plan. Soif, says the Gemara, okay, at the end of the day, sumcha de keresh kamahavi. What was the thickness of the keresh? Amsa. It was an amma wide. Now, how many stacks could he fit onto this wagon, which is a mere 5 amas long? Kamahava moisif. How many stacks could he place there? Arba, 4 stacks. Because Rashi explains it wasn't practical to place 5 stacks, an amma wide, each one an amma thick, on an area which is merely 5 amas. So you need to have some leeway there. So at most they would place is 4 stacks, each one an amma wide, and that leaves us with an extra amma of airspace, because 4 stacks an amma wide each is a total of 4 amas, and the wagon was 5 amas long. Pashali amsa, so you have an extra amma remaining. Now once again, that amma is not in one space, in one area. It's going to be distributed evenly between the different stacks. Says the Gemara once again, if you're going to distribute that airspace in between all those stacks evenly, kilavadami, once again, you're stuck with lavud, because it's much less than the 3 tefachim required to be considered a proper airspace. So we have the same problem again. We have no open area which can be considered an unroofed Rishus Rabbim. Proceeds the Gemara with a third approach. So this will work out well according to the Shita that holds krushim. What was the dimension of the krushim? So we have a machlekes coming on the Gemara soon between Rabbi Yehuda, who says that although the board was wide, an amma down at the bottom, but it narrowed. It was like a triangle. It narrowed as it proceeded towards the top, and narrowed until it was only an etzba wide. It was wide, the width of a finger. This is Rabbi Yehuda's sheet. Rabbi Nechemi says, no, it was an amma wide all throughout, from top to bottom. Says the Gemara, okay, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we have a solution. So this will work out according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the krushim on the bottom, although on the bottom they were an amma wide, an amma thick, milamalon, but as you proceed gradually, kolin v'holchin, it would narrow adke etzba. They would narrow until they were merely an etzba wide. So wide on bottom and sharp on top, narrow on top, sharper. So according to this approach, it can work out. Why? Because if you're going to stack up 4 rows of krushim, which were laying over the width of the agala, so although on one side they're taking up almost the whole area, but on the other side, where they narrow, there's a large space there between one board and the other, which is greater than the shiur of lavud. So we have an open airspace there, an unroofed Rishus Rabbim. So according to this approach, it's going to work well. Elo lemanda amar. However, according to the other shita of Nechemi, who holds that the krushim was symmetrical, kishem shalamatan ovin avi, just like on the bottom they were an amma thick, kach malamala ovin amma, so too on top they were an amma thick, Michael Amemar. So if they were completely an amma from top to bottom, so we're stuck again, because if he has those 4 stacks which are alongside each other on this agala, now although each stack is only an amma wide, because again he's putting them on their narrower side, so you have a total of 4 stacks taking up only 4 ammas of the length of the agala. You're left with an amma remaining, but once you distributed that amma between the stacks, You're left with very small airspace, which is less than required for Lavan. So Lavan means that that airspace is as though it's covered and closed. So we have no unroofed Rishus Harabim beneath those agolas. Says the Gemara, we have a fourth approach, which will accommodate all. Amar Rav Kahana, ba'atbi. Rashi explains that atbi is a clip, a paper clip. So they used to take a stick, slit it alongside its length, and clamp it around the papers to hold it in place. So this is just a mashal, it's an analogy that just as the two sides of this clip are flush, right next to each other, so the boards which were stacked on the agolis, the krushim, were stacked in a way which the krushim were flush with each other. So instead of positioning 4 stacks of krushim with some airspace in between each stack, he would actually do 2 stacks on one side, flush with each other, supporting each other, and then on the other side of the agola, they would place the remaining 2 stacks. This would leave an amma of airspace in between those 2 pairs of stacks. So that's the Gemara's territory. Amar Rav Kahana ba'atbi, that the stacks were flush with each other. So you had 2 stacks on one side of the wagon flush with each other, with no airspace in between. You had another 2 stacks on the other side of the agola flush with each other without any space in between. So the entire airspace remaining, the entire amma remaining, was actually situated between both of those pairs of stacks, leaving us with a full amma of airspace, which is beyond the shear of Lavan. It's considered to be an unroofed Rishus Harabim. And therefore, now we understand what Rav meant, that beneath the wagons, between, on their sides, there was a Rishus Harabim. He's referring to this empty space, which was indeed unroofed. Okay, time for a quick summary. So we began with Rav telling us that if one transfers an item 4 amas Rishus Harabim, which is Rishus Harabim Mekura roofed, he is potter. It's not similar to the Digli Midbar, to the travels of the Yidden in the Midbar, where they had a Rishus Harabim which was unroofed, uncovered. Says more, but how is this compatible with Rav, who tells us that beneath the wagons there was a Rishus Harabim beneath, between them, Tachteim, Beneim, Tzideim, there was a Rishus Harabim there. But the agola was completely covered with the krushim. The Gemara had 4 approaches. Initially the Gemara said, well, there was some airspace there, because he would make 3 stacks, 3 piles of krushim, each one 1.5 amma wide. So there's still going to be a half amma remaining, a half amma of airspace. Says the Gemara, but he distributed that half amma between the stacks, leaving us less than 3 tefachim for each area which is lavud, which is considered to be covered and closed. The Gemara proceeded with a suggestion that they would place the krushim on their narrow side. This way it would only take up an amma of the agola. It would make a total of 4 piles, for a total of 4 ammas, leaving us with an extra amma of the agola, which was airspace. However, we have a problem as well, because that airspace was distributed equally between the piles, leaving us with a very small space. It's love and it's closed off. The Gemara said, well, if the krushim were actually pointed on top, then we have a solution, because on the side where the krushim narrowed, there was a very large airspace. But according to the other shita, that the krushim were perfectly symmetrical, they were wide at tefach on bottom and on top, we need to come up with a new solution. The Gemara said, well, they used to stack up the 4 piles in a manner which resembled a paper clip, meaning the 2 stacks were flush with each other on one side of the agola, two additional 2 stacks on the other side of the agola, leaving a full amma of airspace in between. And that is what Rav was referring to. That area is considered to be a Rishus Harabim because, indeed, it was not roofed or covered. Says the Gemara, 1 second, Atbi heichem manachlu. Now, where did he place these stacks? Agavad agola, on top of the wagon. What about the wagon itself? Agola gufa mekurav. The Gemara is assuming that we're dealing with an ordinary, typical wagon, which had a floor, meant to carry things. So the agola itself had a floor, meaning it was roofed, meaning underneath the agola there was a roofed area. Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel be Seder. It's not speaking about a agola, a wagon which had a floor, Rather, we're speaking about a hollow wagon, we say this rods, meaning it was just an empty, hollow frame without any flooring whatsoever. Let's take a look at Rashi on top of the Amud. Amar Shmuel b'Yiseidis Lo hayu mekuris milamata. So they weren't covered on bottom. Eli Yiseidis hayu. They were merely these sticks, rods. V'revach beineim, with hollow, with space between them. Ke'ein oisen shalanu ha'asuyos lavi'etzim, which resemble those that we use to transport wood. So they had no floors. So indeed it works out because once again we had an amma in between the two pairs of stacks, and that amma was totally unroofed, uncovered. There was no floor to the agala because the agala was merely a hollow frame. Continues the Gemara Tana Rabbanan. We learned on the Bryce. Let's get back to that machlokes regarding the configuration, the dimension of the keresh. Kroshim milamatan ovin amma. On the bottom they were an amma thick. Umilamalan, however, on top, kolin v'holchen at ke'etzba. They would gradually narrow until it only reached a point that it was an etzba wide, the width of a finger. Shenema yu samim al roishay. So they end on top. Ulahalnu oimer tamu nichrasu. Elsewhere, the pasuk says that the water tamu nichrasu, they ended, they got cut off. So just as the word tamu in that context is referring to ending and cutting off here as well, when it speaks about the krushim, the top of the krushim, the head of the krushim, and it says you samim al roishay, what it means to say is that it ended, it narrowed until it was just about a point. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Just as in the bottom they were wide, and amma kach malamalan ovin amma, just so too on top. The thickness was an amma, they were perfectly symmetrical. Shnema yachtav. So the pasuk says yachtav. They're meant to be equal, they're meant to be symmetrical. Continues the Gemara v'oksiv tamim. Now what does Reb Nechemia do with the word samim, which seems to indicate that they ended, that they narrowed? Says the Gemara, who? That word samim is coming to teach you something else. The leisu shleimim. They should bring complete pieces of lumber, whole pieces of wood. Below leisu the nisa, they shouldn't bring fragments. They can't form these boards, these crushim by joining together pieces of wood. It needs to be a complete, one complete whole piece of lumber. V'idach nami haksiv yachtav. What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the pasuk of yachtav, which Rabbi Nechemia used as a basis for his shita that the crush meant to be symmetrical? So what does Rabbi Yehuda do with that word? Says the Gemara, who? That word is coming to teach us that when they position the crushim, they should position them in a way that they're aligned with each other. They're not protruding one from the other. They should be perfectly aligned with each other. But it has nothing to do with the actual size and dimension of the keresh itself. Continues the Gemara. Now this will work well according to the Shita, which says, Kashem shalamatan ovin amma, just as in bottom, their thickness was an amma, kach malamalan ovin amma, so too on top, it was an amma thick. According to this Shita, which is Reb Nechemia, we will understand the following pasuk. So on the western side of the Mishkan, on the Marav side, so the Pesach of the Mishkan was on the east, the opening was on the east, and on the far side, on the western side, which is completely closed off, Tasa Shisha Krashim, you should make 6 Krashim, Ushnei Krashim, Tasa Lemukutzais HaMishkan. So you need to have 6 plus 2 for the corners. So we have a Mishkan with an interior of 30 amas length, 10 amas wide. This was the dimension of the interior of the Mishkan, inside the Mishkan. And you have the Krashim, which are positioned alongside the length, which took up the area of the 30 amas. They covered 30 amas alongside the length of the Mishkan. Now on the far side, on the western side, on Marav side, you need to close it off using 8 Krashim, 6 plus 2 for the corners. Why? Because you need to cover not only the the 10 amos, which comprise the internal width of the Mishkan, you also need to cover the width of those walls, which were positioned alongside the length of the Mishkan. That's why you needed a total of 8 krushim positioned on the western side, the far side of the Mishkan. So 8 krushim positioned alongside each other. Remember, the keresh was an am and a half wide, so 8 of them, 8 times 1.5 equals 12. And that was what was required for that side, because you need to cover 10, which is the space of the actual interior of the Mishkan, plus you need to cover the width of those walls, of those perpendicular walls, which were placed alongside the length of the Mishkan. When the width of a keresh, once again, is an amma. So you need to have an additional amma on each side to cover the width of those walls going alongside the Mishkan. That's why the pasuk tells us you need to have 6 plus 2, which is a total of 8, which equals covers an area of 12 tfachim. 10 is meant to cover the actual space of the Mishkan itself, the interior width of the Mishkan, which was 10, and another 1 am on each side to cover up the width of those walls. So now, if the keresh was symmetrical, was an amma thick on bottom and an amma thick on top, it's going to work perfectly. Says the Gemara, the asi pushya dahani. So the width of the krushim, of the corner krushim, will come mimali l'sumcha dahani, will perfectly fill and cover up for the width of those krushim placed perpendicular, which were part of the walls, which were positioned alongside the length of the Mishkan. So it works perfectly. It's all symmetrical and works perfectly. It fits like a glove. However, according to the Shita, that holds that the keresh on the bottom was an amathic. However, on top it tapers, it narrows until it comes to a point of an etzba. Now it will be stuck. So he's going to cover up that corner. He's going to place a keresh on that corner, which is going to be perpendicular to the other wall. It's going to protrude because the walls, the lengthwise walls, were actually narrowing. And this keresh placed in the corner to cover the width of that wall, which is narrowing on top, this keresh is going to protrude. It's going to stick out. It's going to be uneven, because this keresh is a rectangle. So the top right corner is going to stick out. They're not going to be aligned properly with each other. Says the Gemara, you know what they did? Very simple. They shafilu. They shaved those corner boards. They shaped them, kiturim, like these mountains which are angled on both sides. So they arranged that the shape of those corner boards should perfectly match and be aligned with the contour of the walls which were alongside them. So everything worked perfectly and they matched according to all shittas. Continues the Gemara. The pasuk says, so this internal brace, this rod which was inserted into the thickness of the krushim, and the pasuk actually concludes by saying, Mavriach min akotze el akotze. It permeated from one edge to the other. We go into the Brisa, Tana. B'nei Sayyim, it was standing, was positioned through a miracle. Rashi explains, what was the nace? Because the krushim were positioned in a U-shaped formation. We had 2 long walls backed by a narrow wall. So the Briach HaTichain, this internal brace meant to hold together the krushim, was inserted into the thickness at the beginning of the long wall, was pushed through all the way till the corner, and then it turned the corner. And it proceeded through the narrow wall. It turned the corner again and came back out all again through the long wall, back. Min HaKotz al HaKotz, all the way to the other side, came back out in the same direction, to the same direction in which it was inserted. So this indeed was a miracle, a nace, that was able to turn those corners. Continues the Gemara. So the Gemara is going to begin analyzing for us how exactly they spread the spreadings, the curtains over the Mishkan in light of this machlekes we had earlier regarding the exact symmetry and configuration and shape of those krashim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we have them narrow on top. According to Rabbi Chemia, they were wide on top. Says the pasuk, Ves HaMishkan. This is referring to the first covering. Rashi says it's called Mishkan because it was seen, it was visible inside the Mishkan itself, as opposed to the second covering, the second layer, which was positioned over the first layer. So this first layer, this first covering was comprised of a multicolored wool. And the pasuk says, Ves HaMishkan tasa esi ariyos. You meant to make the first covering consisting of 10 sections. So these sections were lying side by side, connected to each other. Now, how wide, how long were these sections? The length of one section was 28 amas. So each section was 28 amas long and actually 4 amas wide. So the entire first covering over the Mishkan was a covering which had a dimension of 28. And since it was a combined covering of 10 sections, each one 4 amas wide, so 10 times 4 is 40 amas. So it was actually 40 by 28. Says the Gemara, so how did they spread this covering over the Mishkan? Shadi or Chaylu Pusi the Mishkan. So we have the Mishkan, which is 30 by 10. We have this spread, which was 40 by 28. The Gemara is going to focus on each section separately. So each section was 4 by 28. He's going to spread the length of the section over and across the width of the Mishkan. Shadi or Chayla Pusi the Mishkan. Kamahavi. How long was the length? Esr Matami, 28. Dal Esel Igra. You must subtract 10 for the roofing of the Mishkan. So the Mishkan was 10 wide. So you must deduct 10, which was needed to cover the Mishkan itself. How much was left over from 28? You're left with 18. Pashlu Teslai Gisa. So you have 9 for one side, which hung down one side of the Mishkan, but Teslai Gisa, and 9 for the other side. Now let's analyze. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who tells us that the krashim on top are very narrow, so you can use the entire leftover from 28 to hang down from the sides. So the keresh was 10 amasai. Now at the bottom of the krashim there were these sockets, adonim, which were included in the 10 amah height. So according to Yehuda, we have 9 remaining for each side. So it hung down all the way, almost to the floor. Megalia amad adonim. So the only thing left revealed was that last amma, the bottom amma, the amma of the sockets. Now, unfortunately, point out, although according to Yehuda, the krashim on top were an espa wide, but since it's such a small measure, we don't reckon with it here. So we tend to ignore it in our calculation here. So according to Yehuda, once again, the area was 28 long, 10 was needed for the roofing of the Mishkan, leaves us with 18, 9 hanging down for each side, leaving merely the bottom amma of the keresh exposed. However, the Rav Nechemia, who holds that the krashim were an amma wide on top as well, so we need to reckon for that, we need to account for that thickness. And therefore, from this 28, we need to deduct 12 to account for the actual hollow space of the Mishkan, which was 10, the internal width. And we need to add an amma for each side to cover the top of the krashim. If so, it leaves us with how much remaining? Merely 16. The Ramechemia megali amma de krashim. So we have 16, 8 hanging down for each side. So it comes up 2 ammas short from the floor. So not only was the adonim left exposed, but also the bottom amma of the keresh was left exposed. So a total of 2 ammas were left exposed. Okay, so now we addressed the width of the Mishkan. What about the length of the Mishkan? Proceeds the Gemara. Shadi pusayu l'orcha the Mishkan. He's going to lay down the the sections, the width of the section. So the width of those sections will be placed alongside the length of the Mishkan. So each section was 4 amas wide, and those 10 sections combined give us a total of 40 amas, which are going to be spread alongside the length of the Mishkan. Kama have burn, we have 40. Dalet tlasim liigra. So subtract 30, which was needed to cover the Mishkan itself. So how much is remaining from the 40? Pashalu yud. We have 10 remaining. So once again, let's analyze based on the two shittas. The Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, mechasya amada adanim. According to him, the krashim were very narrow on top. We didn't need to account for that. So that entire leftover, those 10 amas, can simply drag down, can hang down the back of the Mishkan, all the way down to the floor, and cover up these sockets as well. The Rabbi Yehuda mechasya amada adanim. The am of the adanim will be covered over as well. The Rabbi Nechemya, however, we come up an amma short because we need to cover the thickness of the keresh on top. That takes off another am. So we're only left with 9 remaining of the covering behind the Mishkan, hanging down behind the Mishkan, Megali Amad Adanim, according to Nechemya. It only hangs down 9 amas, leaving the bottom amma exposed, which is the am of the Adanim. Continues the Gemara. Okay, so we addressed the first layer, the first covering. And we explained it according to Rabbi Yehuda and Nechemya. Continues the Gemara, Vasisa Yiriyas Izim La'oil. Now we're going to address the second layer, which was the Yiriyas Izim made of the goats here. How long, how wide were they? Says the pasuk Oirich Hayriya Achas. So each section was Shloshim Amma, 30 amas long, and they were 4 amas wide. In this case, there was a total of 11 sections attached to each other for a total of 44 amas long, because each section is 4 amas wide. You attach 11 of these, you reach 44, and the length of each section was 30 amas. Let's figure out how they positioned it on the Mishkan. Shadi Urchai Lepusi the Mishkan. So they would place their lengths, the lengths of the sections, which were 30 amas long, over the width of the Mishkan. Kama havya, how long were they? Tlasin, 30. Dalesa le'igra, deduct 10 needed for the roofing of the Mishkan, which was 10 amas wide. How much is remaining? Pashalu eselagisa eselagisa. So you began with 30, deducted 10, you're left with 20. Pashalu eselagisa, you have left 10 for this side. Ve'eselagisa, another 10 to have for the other side. So let's analyze. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, all 10 were hanging down, and they reached all the way down to the floor. Mechasi amad adanim. In this case, even the am of the adanim were fully covered. The Rabbi Nechemya, however, migali amad adanim. According to Rabbi Nechemya, these leftover portions did not equal 10 because he needed to add another amma to account for the thickness of the keresh. So according to Rabbi Nechemya, we began with 30, but instead of merely needing 10 to cover the Mishkan, we needed 12. 10 plus the am on each side, which leaves us with only 18 remaining, 9 for each side. So it reached an amma short of the ground. Indeed, the amma of the adono, the sockets, remained uncovered. Tani nami hachi, we learned as well in the Brisa that the second covering, the upper covering, the Riyas Izim, v'ama mizeh, v'ama mizeh, an am on each side, ba'oidef, which was extra, which was was in addition to the lower covering, meaning it was longer than lower covering. L'chai says amma shla. So this added amma that the second layer had, because it was a larger covering, it covered up the adanim which were left exposed by the first covering, the Rabbi Yehuda. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the first covering left the amma exposed on the sides of the Mishkan, but the second covering covered that as well. Rabbi Nechemya Omer, that the extra amma of the second covering was there lechases amma shel krashim. it didn't get down all the way to cover the Adanim because it was only 9 amas. What did it do? It covered that revealed portion of the Krushim, that Amma which was left revealed when they put the first covering. So the Brisa here indeed concurs with our description of events. So now we're still holding at the second covering, at the upper covering, the Reis Izim. We discussed the way they spread it over the width of the Mishkan. Now let's analyze the length of the Mishkan. Shadi Pusayu Lurcha the Mishkan. So they would place the width of these sections alongside the length of the Mishkan. Kam Mahavya, how much do we have? What is the total? Mem Va'arba, 44. Because each section was 4 amas wide. 11 of those totaled 44. So we have a spread which has a dimension of 44 by 30. Now this 44 was placed alongside the length of the Mishkan. Subtract 30 needed to cover the Mishkan itself, which had a space of 30. How much is remaining? Pashalu Arba Sri. You have 14 remaining. 44 minus 30 is 14. Now Dal, you need to subtract 30, 2 of those amas, like kaflo, which were folded over, which were draped over the front, the doorway of the Mishkan. So you meant to cover, fold over the 6th section, because the upper covering of the Reis Izim were a combined 11 sections. They were actually split into 2, 5 and 6. So the pasuk here is referring to the last section is going to be folded over. So 2 of the width of that section, 2 amas of that section will be folded over to cover over el mupnei oil. So over the front, the doorway of the oil. So that took away 2 of our leftover covering, because we started with 44, we deducted the 30, which gave us 14 remaining. 2 of that were needed to cover up to be draped over the opening of the Mishkan. Pashlo Tatisri. So we're left with 12. And this would hang down the backside of the Mishkan. Says the Gemara, Bishleim Rabbi Yehuda. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the entire 12 tefachim were draped behind the Mishkan, because he needs nothing for the top of the Krushim, they're very narrow. So the entire leftover of the area would trail down the back of the Mishkan down on the floor. Haina d'chsiv. According to him, we understand what the pasuk says. Chatzi hayiriya haydefes tisrach. So we have 12, which are hanging down the back. Now, how much is really needed to cover the Krushim? Only 10. The remaining 2 were actually draped on the floor. So that's Pshan the Pasuk. The Pasuk says half of the area, meaning half of the width. Area is 4 amas wide, half of it meaning 2. The half of the area which is extra, which is lagging past the lower area, the lower covering, tisrach, it trailed. It would trail on the floor, because those 2 were simply sitting on the floor. However, according to Nechemia, who holds that although we had 12 remaining, but it wasn't really 12, because you need to have 1 amma to account for the top of the Krushim in the back. So 1 amma went up for that, leaving us with merely 11 hanging down. So how does he understand the pasuk, which tells us that half a urea, which seems to tell us that a urea which is 4 and half of it which is 2 is going to trail? According to Nechemia, we only have 11 hanging down the backside of the Mishkan, and only 1 of those 11 is actually on the floor. El Nechemia, my tisrach. What does it mean when the pasuk says trailing? Tisrach mechavriseh. It trailed behind its companions, meaning the upper covering was 2 amas longer. In the back of the Mishkan was 2 amas longer than the lower covering. That's all the pasuk means. Tizrach mechavriseh. It was 2 amas longer than its companions, than the lower covering. But certainly, at the end of the day, it was only one amma which is actually trailing on the floor itself. Continues the Gemara. What was the Mishkan similar to? What did it resemble? To a woman who is walking in the marketplace, and the lower portions of her clothing, her train, are trailing her. Here as well, the urias of the Mishkan were draped on the floor. They were trailing, so to speak, behind the Mishkan. So, for a quick summary of what we just learned, we have two coverings over the Mishkan. We have the lower one and the higher one. So the first covering was a covering which consisted of 10 sections, each one 28 by 4, for a total of 40 by 28. The Gemara told us that the 28 was spread over the width of the Mishkan. Now, according to Nehemiah, we need to account for the thickness of the Krushim as well. So we need to deduct from that 28, we need to deduct not only the 10, which is the interior width of the Mishkan, we need to add another amma for each side for a total of 12. So we deduct 12 from the 28. It leaves us with 16, providing us with an additional 8 ammas of spread, which hung over both sides of the width of the Mishkan, leaving the two bottom ammas of the Keresh exposed. So the bottom one was the Adonim, and also the next amma of the Keresh itself. According to Rabbi Yehuda, however, we have a total of 9, which were hanging over on each side, which covered up until the Adonim. But the Adonim itself was certainly left exposed. What about the length of the Mishkan? So according to Reb Nehemiah, so we have this spread which is 40 amas long. So when we spread that along the length of the Mishkan, we deduct 31, actually, according to Nehemiah, because 30 for the interior and an additional 1 for the thickness of the Krushim. So we have remaining 9, which was hanging over the back of the Mishkan, almost till the bottom, leaving the Adonim, the bottom Amma, exposed. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we have 40. We deduct merely 30 to cover the Mishkan itself. We have another 10, which were left hanging behind the Mishkan to cover the entire Keresh all the way to the bottom, to the floor. So this was the first layer, the first covering over the Mishkan. Let's proceed with the next layer, the Urias Izim, which had a total of 44 by 30, because once again each section was 30 by 4, and we have a combined total of 11 of these sections for a total of 44 by 30. The Gemara tells us that the 30 was the one that was spread over the width of the Mishkan. So according to Nehemiah, we need to deduct not only the 10 of the interior, but we need to deduct 12 to account for the thickness of the top of the Krushim. So we deduct 12 from 30. That leaves us with 18, leaving us with 9 hanging over on each side, covering over the Krushim up until the Adonim. But the Adonim itself were left exposed according to Nehemiah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Urias Izim covered over even the Adonim, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, we deducted merely 10 from this 30. We're left with 20, 10 for each side of the Mishkan, which went all the way down to the floor. So according to all Shittas, the upper level, the Urias Izim, were covered more ground, more area, a tefach more than the lower covering. Now what about the length of the Mishkan? So we're dealing with 44. We put it alongside the length of the Mishkan. According to Reb Nehemiah, we need to deduct not only 30, we need to deduct 31 to account for the thickness of the Krushim. So we need to deduct 31 from 44, which leaves us with 13. The Gemara told us that 2 of those amas were draped over the doorway, the opening at the front of the Mishkan, which leaves us 11 to hang behind the Mishkan, covering the entire Krushim with the Adonim, and leaving us with an additional amma lying draped on the floor itself. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he took the 44, put it over the length of the Mishkan. So the length of the Mishkan only required 30 for the interior of the Mishkan. So it leaves us with 14 remaining. 2 of those were draped over the opening of the Mishkan, leaving us with 12 which hung behind the Mishkan. So 10 completely covered the Krashim with the Adonim, and the additional 2 were draped on the floor behind the Mishkan. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Brisa. Charutzim ha-Krashim, the Krashim were carved out on the bottom. They had these 2 protrusions. The Pasuk calls them Yodos, these 2 hands, the 2 tenets, which protruded from the bottom of the Keresh and were encased in these silver Adonim, these silver cases. V'chalulim hayu Adonim. These Adonim were hollow and encased these Yodos. Continues the Brisa, another thing. V'nirin krasim belulois. You meant to know that the krasim, the golden hooks that were put through the blue loops, they appeared kikechav merakia, like glistening stars in the blue sky. Now, which krasim we were speaking about, says Rashi, was speaking about the first covering, the lower covering over the Mishkan. As we learned, it consisted of 10 subsections, each one 4 amos wide. So Rashi explains they used to actually sew together 5 of these subsections to each other. So you had 5 sewed together, another 5 sewed together, and then they used to attach these 2 large sections using the krasim, the golden hooks, which were put through the blue loops. And as the Gemara says, they appeared in those loops like glistening stars in the sky. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with the halacha of a person who is standing in Rosh Hashanah and throws an object over Rosh Hashanah into another Rosh Hashanah. If that object traveled through Rosh Hashanah, even if you need to combine both sections of Rosh Hashanah to arrive at the total of 4 amos, he's chayiv. The Gemara told us as well that we don't reckon with the fact that it passed through the airspace of Rosh Hashanah. Kluta lav k'mashahuncha, it's not as though it landed there. Rav told us that the halacha of transferring from Rosh Hashanah only applies to Rosh Hashanah, which is unroofed, does not have a covering. Says the Gemara, but how is that consistent with what Rav told us, that underneath those wagons, which contain the stacks of the krashim in the midbar, underneath those wagons are considered to be Rosh Hashanah, but they're covered. So the Gemara began to analyze the configuration of those stacks. The Gemara told us it's actually a machlekes. Regarding the shape of the krashim, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the thickness of the krashim were an amma on the bottom, but then it narrowed to merely an etzba up on top. So like a triangle, according to Nehemiah, they were consistent throughout, they were symmetrical, an amma thick on bottom and an amma thick on top. So based on this, the Gemara told us, we can understand how come underneath those krashim, it will have a din of Rosh Hashanah, because one of 2 options. So according to the shita that the krashim were narrow on top, so when they were lying across the agolis, there was sufficient space by the narrow side of the krashim to create open area, unroofed, and that area is considered to be a Rosh Hashanah. According to the shita of Nehemiah, that the krashim were actually symmetrical, the Gemara concluded apparently they were stacked in a manner where we had 2 double stacks on either side of the agola, leaving a full amma in between those double stacks. So that was an unroofed area, which is Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara proceeded and described for us, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the Keresh was very narrow on top. How did they configure the corner krashim? The Gemara said they shaved it, and they shaped it in a way that it aligned the shape, the contour of the walls perpendicular to it. The Gemara proceeded to describe for us the way they spread the 2 coverings over the Mishkan. And the point is that according to Nehemiah, we need to account for the thickness of the krashim as well. The Gemara concluded describing for us the protrusions coming out of the keresh and the glistening hooks, which appeared as though they were stars glistening in the sky.